Matt, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Jeff. Very good, mate. Very, very good. Sun shining. Can't complain.
So there was a bit of commentary on Twitter at the weekend as the footage was emerging of the brilliant game between the Wallabies and France and just the intensity of those three tests. Somebody was making the point after one of those 95-metre tries that only the French can score, it seems. It was like, oh, wow, look, this is what happens when you get your best players playing in the same team in a summer test series, while our best players are currently either having their little hearts broken by Warren Gatland or learning new tricks from their erstwhile rivals in what seems like a very anachronistic thing that is just part of a tradition. And it's an interesting conversation to have. Do we benefit from the Lions as a rugby country, or actually is it a bit of a hindrance in the middle of a World Cup cycle? I'm not sure.
I guess you could mount arguments for both sides. I'll just give you my personal experience. The players that I was coaching who came back from the Lions tours were immeasurably better for the experience of being on those Lions tours. Brian O'Driscoll was just a completely different person, in my opinion, at the end of the 2001 trip, where he'd been around all these great professionals as Ireland was still trying to learn how to be a professional organisation. Now, those days are over. The French in a Wallaby game, if we skip to that for a minute, we also have to remember that the French left a very strong, significant number of their best players out of that test side. There was no Duponts in that side, no Aldrits. They'd left, by my estimations, 12 of their best players out. No Gael Fickou. So what Fabien Galthié did in his tremendous strategy building towards the next World Cup, he brought out, or played rather, basically one or two of his first 15 players and the rest were his second and third 15 players, but who played exceptionally well. Now, they've just produced on their depth chart players that they did not even believe could play Test rugby. They excelled. The fullback there, who played for Perpignan, who were in the second division here in France, he selected. So it tells you how strong French rugby is. It tells you also that Australian rugby's rebuilding very much so. They were very fortunate to win the Test series. And France should have won that first Test home. All they do is kick the ball out, and they didn't. It was just the most amazing end to a game I've seen in a long time. How France lost it was incredible. What the French did brilliantly, though, is they exploited sin bins and send-off. So Korobidi, the Australian winger, was sent off in the first minute wrongly for a high shot. He's been exonerated. It was a ridiculous decision. And the Australians, we thought, would pay a huge penalty, and they showed so much courage, which I'm delighted about, through the whole game to win it. But that try you're speaking about was how you exploit a team that is a man down. And France not only exploited it, they showed absolutely staggering individual skills and scored one of the tries of not just the season, but probably the last 10 years. It'll go down as one of the great international tries. So I guess you've got an argument on both sides for it. I think as far as Ireland go, we just look at it through an Ireland perspective. Does it give Ireland the chance to build their depth in a depth chart? Possibly. The quality of the opposition, probably not. You know, there's those guys got starts. Joey got a start. Joey Carberry got a start. We saw some really good young players get their opportunity. The quality of the opposition was obviously highly questionable in comparison to where Ireland have to go. So Ireland have to beat one of the top four to make a semi-final. They've always beaten the others, but they haven't been able to make a semi-final in the World Cup. So that means you've got to beat France, New Zealand, South Africa or England. That's the ones you've got to beat. Now, we beat England in the last Six Nations, so that's a plus. But will you beat them at a World Cup? Now, I think we needed that summer. But look, it's a mute argument because the Lions is a cash cow and the European nations need the cash cow. It's always going to stay because it makes more money than anything they have. So I guess whether we think it's a good thing or a bad thing doesn't matter. It's staying.
I think as well, in non-COVID times, we would be in Fiji with 3 tests and we would be seeing the depth chart emerge, you know, a new back row, new partnerships at 9 and 10, and we'd be able to lean into the whole notion that actually having our best players away, hothouse and learning and stealing the ideas from Gregor Townsend and whoever else is on that coaching ticket in the past, it would have been Edwards and all the other people that they would have learned from that perspective makes lots of sense, while we're also cultivating the new group of players. So I definitely see both sides as well. But the point you make ultimately...
Could I make a point? Could I make a point there? I think the last World Cup, and I'm not a critic of Joe Schmidt because I know I've said things about the teams Joe coached, but I'm a super admirer of Joe. I think he's the best coach Ireland and Leinster ever had. So hands up, that is not it. But when Ireland went to Australia at a year before the last World Cup, I was arguing to leave the good boys at home, like Sexton and Conor Murray, and bring the other guys through. They're the ones that we're missing. We've got to, and this is where we have to look what Galtier has done well. He's gone to one of the big countries in the south. Now, Australia's the bottom of the three. There's no doubt about that. But he did do exactly that. He left out his big names and put the younger guys on. That's where I think we're missing out. When we get the opportunity to go to a top-tier southern country, we're not using that opportunity, because that's where you learn. You learn a bit playing against Japan and the States and so on. It's really when you come against a really high-quality outfit. As a player, you learn, and that experience is just vital. That's where I think we're missing out.
So this November then, much better opposition for Ireland. Would you suggest to leave Sexton out, to leave Murray out for those big tests?
I think you have the opportunity to, Owen. I'm not saying we leave Johnny or Connor out specifically, but yes, would Casey and the other young players coming through benefit from starting, which is very different to coming off the bench, starting against one of these big sides, without doubt. And yes, I've got to say, if I know the coaches' contracts are signed financially, that the more you win, the more you get paid. So if I'm one of those coaches, I pick that. There has to be a way to empower our coaches, like Galtier's been empowered, to not select your best players all the time without being hindered financially, because that's certainly a reason why a lot of the coaches don't select the younger players in some matches, not all matches. But November is a great opportunity to say, okay, look, we're coming up against one of the big three from the south. We're going to sprinkle the team, not put 10 of them in, but we're going to put 2 or 3 starters in there. Coombs needs to start one of these big games. He's a huge talent coming through. That's where we're missing the opportunity. That Australian series that Ireland won, and everyone was crying, we won the series. And yeah, it's great. They hadn't done it since '79 when Kieran Fitzgerald led the side down to Australia. I get it. But did it do us any good at the World Cup? Answer's no. It was just it's a line on history. If the goal, and that's what I mean about it, frustrates me about Ireland. If the goal is truly to win a World Cup, if you believe deeply in your soul that we can, and I've seen a number of generations of Irish players come and go that have underachieved at a World Cup, because I don't believe the organisation takes that emotion into their heart. We can win a World Cup. And that's where it starts, with someone saying it and driving it. And until we get to that point, and that might mean sacrificing some other games on the way through in the cycle, until we get to that point, we're always going to struggle at a World Cup, because it's a different beast. And we've got to look at the teams that are successful at World Cups. They do these things. New Zealand do it, Australia do it, France is doing it. Galtier's a smart guy. He's learnt. He speaks to people. He rings them up. He talks to them. I met him a number of years ago. I was so impressed with Fabien Galtier. I knew he was going to be a great international coach after I'd spoken to him for a couple of hours. The guy is a sponge. He wants to learn, and will sacrifice, as he did. He sacrificed that tour. They could have won with his best team. So what? He now has a depth chart, like almost better than everyone except New Zealand. And that's what the benefit is of sacrificing some of these tours in between World Cups.
I think it makes a lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see what happens now. We have a fairly hectic November series, and then obviously the summer next year, but there's not a whole heap of time for any of these coaches to build that depth chart. So very interesting to see who can make it in the meantime. Let's move on to the Lions, and obviously we've talked about the fact that the money for the Southern Hemisphere is one of the main reasons why this will continue to be what it is, which is a bolted-in fixture in the calendar every 4 years. Notwithstanding, the tragedies that are unfolding in South Africa with regards to COVID and the civil unrest at the moment, these matches are going ahead, and whatever about the rights and wrongs of this, I mean, I don't know, maybe we should talk about that, because it's hard to ignore the fact that there's every reason in the world for these matches not to go ahead, and yet from South African rugby's perspective, they can't afford for them not to happen. It's a horrific situation for the people in South Africa. It's also a pretty grim financial situation for South African rugby.
Like everything when you're dealing with South Africa, it's complicated, you know. I've written a bit about it in the Irish Times. It's not straightforward. We just have to assume when you're dealing with South African rugby, during apartheid and post-apartheid, the politics of the national government are involved. You just have to take that as a given. Be it selection of the team, pre and post-apartheid, the national government is involved. For the tour to be called off would be for the national government of South Africa, which is, since Nelson Mandela won the elections almost 30 years ago, has been the African National Congress. They've been the party in power. For them to allow the tour to be called off would be just saying to the world, we've lost control of our country. They're not going to do that. The deaths won't matter. Civil unrest is a different story. That's where you've got the current president trying to reclaim some of the party, the African National Congress Party, that Zuma, the previous president, had basically corrupted in what was, in the words of the current South African president, state capture. And they're trying to wind that back and get control of it again. And the agitation is set up by Zuma's supporters, some of them within the ANC, trying to overturn what is obviously an attempt to regain control of the government and an administration that has spiralled out of control, where we see the COVID deaths. You know, I just don't believe the numbers they're saying. The deaths in the townships and the deaths out in the black communities are much greater than the numbers we're seeing. The poverty and so on that is still existing in the townships, which is beyond imagination. I've visited them. I've visited a number of them, and I try and explain to my family what I've seen, and they can't understand it. I've been there, and I can't understand the poverty that these people have continued to live in for 30 years. So all this is all intertwined, as it has done for hundreds of years in South Africa. The mixture of the politics, the people, the parties, the beliefs, and sport has tended to be a way they express it, their beliefs, and so it's a huge mixed match. These games are going ahead. Doesn't matter where. Is it moral? Well, look, I don't know. It's not for me. I can't make a judgment on that, because it is a democracy. People do vote, but is there incredible corruption? Is there illness and death because of that corruption? Are we supporting that corruption? Well, I've got to leave that up to someone else. It's certainly not what the apartheid days were, but it's a terrible, terrible place for the African people of all colours to be at the moment.
Yeah, and it's hard to know how that feeds into the emotion of the South Africans in particular who are taking the field at the weekend, and maybe Rasmus is the perfect person to deal with that. I mean, Rassie is somebody who obviously in Ireland left with a brilliant reputation as a very charismatic man who led Munster through a very difficult period, and then left him in the lurch a little bit at the end. But I think everybody understands when you see the videos of him talking to the South African team that was the job that he was born to do and always wanted to do. So maybe in retrospect, Munster are happy that they had him for the short period that they did. What did you make of Rassie versus Gatland on Twitter, and what's your instinct about whether or not it's a good thing to be doing to stir the pot against Gatland, and if actually that might be what Gatland wants, or is that meeting fire with fire and somebody finally standing up to Gatland? What did you take? What was your take?
There's a bit of a storm in a teacup. I think they're both laughing about it. Look, let's go both sides. Rassie shouldn't have done that. That's not what you're supposed to do. There is agreement. Coaching staff aren't technically allowed on the field. Now, if you watch the Wallabies on Saturday, their attack coach, Scotty Wiseman, one of my former players from Eastwood Rugby Club, a great guy, a lovely man. Scotty's running water for the Wallabies. So, look, every team has some sort of way of communicating. Does Gaddy need to be on the field to communicate with his team? No, they've got radios. You can say it and it gets to the players immediately. So I don't believe that Rassie being on the field was the difference between the sides. Should Rassie have done it? Technically not. But in Rassie's defence, they were smashed by COVID. They had staff that weren't allowed at the games. They couldn't bring anyone in. So they had all of those staff and non-rugby staff. They were doing jobs they weren't supposed to be doing. Everyone was all hands to the pump. We're in a bit of a crisis. We just got to get through this. So I think a little bit of understanding of Rassie and his predicament should be given. Was there a difference between the teams? Absolutely not. Does it mean anything? Absolutely not. On Saturday, when they go out and the Lions are there, are they going to get in a circle and go, and remember, Rassie was running water? Come on. Let's be big boys here and get on with it. I mean, I just think it was Gaddy being Gaddy. He found something to pick at. They got beaten well and truly by a better side. That's might be why he's trying to hide it. They've had 5 facile games that haven't meant much. The one game that was a big game, they got beaten and they didn't manage it well. As I've said before, mate, what they did in that sin bin period when South Africa were down to 13, that was appalling. That's close to the worst 10 minutes of sin bin management by the team that had superior numbers I've ever seen. They lost the game there. And I think, Gaddy's good at deflecting. I think that was a deflection away from why didn't they call a scrum? Why did they, when they had a superior, a numerical superiority, did they tap the ball and go? They then had a line out and they called a 5-man line out instead of calling a full line out to suck the Africans in. You've got 13 there, 1 forward, 1 back down. If you have a set play, the Africans have to make a choice where they're going to put players. And you obviously attack where they don't have them. If they had a scrum just before half time, the Africans have got to pick a place, either a 7-man scrum and 6 in the back line, or do they put them in? You've got a 5 in the back line.
So if a school team and a school captain made those decisions, you would be critical of them in the aftermath of that, saying, like,
absolutely.
What were you thinking? So there must have been some sense we're not going to reveal, we're not going to do, this is the most vanilla. We're going to go out and we're going to fight the South African A team because they're physically, I want you all to feel that. But unless it's just a complete shambles, surely there's just everything is vanilla today. Don't show anything. Don't show your hand. Don't reveal your hand. If you get the chance to just tap and go, I want you to feel in your muscles what it's going to be like in the Test series, lads. That's it. Surely. No? Am I wrong?
Look, you don't say to your players, don't win the game. If you ever said that to any player, they never, they lose all respect for you. So the primary, and you couldn't say it to the players, you've got to win. So the decision there is not coming down from on top. Okay, they were down to 13 men. We've got a penalty, there's 20 seconds to go before halftime. We've already tapped and gone 7 or 8 times. They couldn't get any more physicality in that game, surely.
Fair enough.
And they tapped and went. They picked and went like it seemed an eternity. I walked out to the kitchen and came back in and they were still tapping and going and running into each other. I mean, it was boring. They should have taken the scrum. And you get what a psychological advantage to get over the Africans, where you have a scrum and you might get a penalty try, you might get a pushover try. All those things came into play. So I just thought it was really, really poor on-field management.
Does Conor Murray take the blame for some of that period?
He's captain. He has to, but surely the English captain was on the field as well. So there's a lot of leaders out there that could have said, "Come, let's take the scrum." So I just think it was really, I think it was a bit of arrogance, to be honest with you, that they dominated everyone else so much they were going to get over. And it was just personified. Mario Toje, like a giant of a human being, one of the most powerful men I've ever seen play the game, picks and goes. He gets under Estevez, so he's physically under Estevez. Estevez is out of weakness. Estevez bear hugs him, but he's over the top. He hasn't got any leverage. He twists at Toje, picks him up and drives him back 2 metres. If ever you needed a little lesson in that, trying to out-headbutt South Africans is a lesson in futility. You are never going to do it. They are the world champions at headbutting. You've got to think about some other strategy. You had a numerical advantage, you didn't take it. That's just dumb footy. And there's no other way to put it. Now, will they learn from that, the Lions? Absolutely. Have they learned from that game? Absolutely. Has Gaddy learned from the quarter-final at the last World Cup where they kicked the ball 40 times and South Africa kicked it 41 and they headbutted South Africa and lost? I hope so, because if you go out in the first test and you get back to that headbutting competition, you're going to lose again. They'll win it every time. You've got to do something different to beat the Africans.
Have you seen enough to suggest that the Lions are going to win the first test? Or, because look, I don't understand it, but the bookmakers make the Lions slight favourites for the first test, and everything I've seen suggests that South Africa A is like 50% of what the full team is going to be this weekend. The whole, oh, they haven't played any rugby. Well, they haven't played any rugby together, but they've all been playing world-class rugby for the best teams in the world for the last 18 months, and they are the world champions.
I'm with you, Joe. I think it's a very even contest. It's not going to be, you know, I think the Lions could have won that A game, as I just said. They got a bad decision at the end of the game. I thought they definitely resembled, absolutely scored a try at the end of the game, but the ball was clearly on the line. So they could have won that game. So there's not much in it. But the Africans are going to be a lot better for what they were, and they're going to have new players coming in. The Lions have got everyone but one player, but Finn Russell, available to them. Like, they are going to be a powerful outfit as well. But they've got to play something besides kick and chase and headbutt. They've got to get the ball wide. South Africa will give them opportunities, but there's going to be very few of those opportunities. They're going to be like 2 or 3 in the game. They've got to take them. If they don't, they'll lose. So I certainly wouldn't be betting on either side. I don't like losing my money because I just think it's a toss of a coin. The first test, I actually think the Lions should have an advantage, but I don't believe they do. I think the lead-up games have been so poor for them that they haven't got a massive amount out of it. You heard Tandy saying they had a 90-minute selection meeting, the hardest meeting they ever had. I've tried to pick a side here and I'm going, wow, I don't know. There's about 7 positions could go either way. And there's arguments for both sides. Whoever you leave out, you know, how do you justify it? Whoever you put in, how do you justify it? So it's going to be a really tight. It's going to be a fascinating game. Don't get me wrong. I think it's going to be a brilliant game. It's going to be fascinating who the Lions pick in almost every position going through, including people that we thought were fastened on, like Connor Murray. Like, Connor's position's under real threat now, and a week ago I didn't believe that. So I don't think it's going to be advantage anyone. I think it's a really even contest. I will say this. I can tell you exactly how South Africa will play. I know exactly how they play. And so does a whole lot of other rugby people in the world. They're not going to play any different. It's what the Lions do that will determine the outcome of that test. If the Lions can find a different way, and they've been trying it in their attack, hasn't been perfect, but they've been trying it. They've been trying it with their kicking game, hasn't been perfect. Yeah. But if they can get it right, get what they've been trying right, they've got a really good shot at it. But the Africans, they come in route one. They're going to bash you up. They're going to give you the front of the line out. They're going to scrummage. They're going to physical. They're going to kick. They're going to chase. They're going to frustrate you. And any penalty you give within 60 metres, they're going to kick. And it's won them 3 World Cups. They've been doing the same thing since '95. Hasn't changed, and it's effective.
Matt, great stuff. The appetite is suitably wet. Thanks a million.
See you guys. Great to talk to you.
Always really thoughtful stuff there from Matt Williams, giving us his thoughts. If you've views, we'd love to hear them. 0879 180 180. And of course, I should remind you that the games are all live here on Off the Ball on News Talk. You can hear it. 5 o'clock kickoff. Brian O'Driscoll and Neil Tracy on commentary duty for the first test. We're going to bring you live commentary of the 3 tests. Obviously, the first one is the Springboks against the Lions. 5 o'clock kickoff. Pre-match, post-match analysis as well from our star-studded array of analysts. And a reminder that all our Lions coverage is brought to you in association with Vodafone, lead partner of the British and Irish Lions. Really looking forward to that. We've got an interview with Ross and Harry Byrne a little bit later on.